Colombia is named as the second most deadly country for environmental leaders defending their land. The outgoing governor of Puerto Rico has named his successor. And protesters took to the streets of Al Obeid in Sudan, where a number of students were shot dead 2 days ago. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. During a news conference, Venezuelan Vice President Delcy condemned the attempts of the opposition at illegally expropriating oil company Citgo, labeling it as an organized crime requested by Washington.
People who are part of the Voluntad Popular Group, which is no longer even a political party, as they have been responsible for terrorist acts, have most recently been trying to illegally seize control of Venezuelan assets abroad. Those are acts of organized crime in accordance with the desires of the government of the United States. We discovered this information thanks to a chat between Roberto Marrero and Juan Guaido, where they plot to illegally seize control of Citgo in the U.S. This is an international operation to steal the assets of Venezuela.
Vice President Rodriguez also spoke about Washington's expectations of opposition figure Juan Guaido, saying he is simply being used to steal assets belonging to the Venezuelan people.
I direct this to Juan Guaido and to his brother, who is also a thief. The U.S. Department of State says that you are a nobody, that you were not able to fight against President Maduro and the people of Venezuela. But they do recognize your qualities as a thief, because that is what they are using him for, to steal the assets of the people of Venezuela.
Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro welcomed members of the Embassy Protection Collective at the Miraflores Palace on Tuesday night. The activists from the United States went to Caracas to take part in the Sao Paulo Forum, which ended at the weekend. The collective, which includes the movements Code Pink and Answer Coalition, defended the Venezuelan embassy in Washington for several weeks in April against attempts by the Venezuelan opposition to occupy it. They were finally evicted in an illegal operation by the U.S. police. President Maduro and his foreign minister thanked them for their brave defense of international law.
We also send our warmest greetings to those members of the Embassy Protection Collective in Washington who couldn't be with us tonight, especially the 4 comrades who are facing charges and possible prison sentences or high fines, just because they defended Venezuela, defended peace and the unity of our peoples. We continue to fight together, coordinating, and sooner or later we will see, as President Salvador Allende of Chile once said, big changes, broad avenues that will open up for the people of the United States as well. Thank you very much. Long live the unity of the people of the United States and the people of Venezuela.
And the members of the Embassy Protection Collective explained why they had chosen to defend the Venezuelan mission in Washington and why they were in Caracas.
We are here because our government and a corporate media which acts as an arm of its foreign policy is pursuing a dangerous and catastrophic policy of siege and regime change. And we've seen the catastrophes that this same policy has caused for Central America, for Iraq, for Libya, for Syria, and for so many people across the world, in Korea and elsewhere. And we are here to renounce this policy. And we are here as citizens and also as journalists to break the blockade that our government has put not only on this government, but on relations between the American people and the Venezuelan people seeking to build a new society through the Bolivarian Revolution. And it's for that same reason that we participated in an embassy protection collective to not only defend the Venezuelan embassy, but to defend the principles of international law and the basic truth about this regime change policy.
Moving on, Colombia has been named the second most dangerous country in the world for those defending their land and the environment. It comes just after the Philippines and ahead of India, Brazil, and Guatemala. That's according to a report by the British NGO Global Witness, which says most of the victims were assassinated for their opposition to mining, extraction industries, and industrial agriculture.
In the wake of the grave humanitarian crisis in Colombia, environmental activists and students have called on President Duque to protect the life of social leaders who are being killed in environmental conflicts across the country.
The term environmental conflict is used by different social actors who don't agree with the projects and generate opposition and mobilizations against them and the response of the companies. The government usually favors business. It is the cause of stigmatization, threats, and finally the murders of the leaders opposing the projects.
This urgent call has been made just as the English NGO Global Witness revealed that Colombia has the second highest number of environmental leaders murdered in the world, a reality that for analysts is linked to the signing of the peace agreement.
These are the spaces and territories that have become free for new concessions and licenses through the themes of neoliberal peace, removing armed groups and allowing in new petitions.
According to the Colombian indigenous organization OPIAC, more than 146 indigenous leaders and ancestral authorities have been killed since the signing of the peace agreement for opposing neoliberal projects.
The Colombian government assigned more than 15 territories for oil exploration to the Amerisur company. There are companies that violate the agreement, like the Canadian company Gran Tierra Energy, which forced the Inga community to defend themselves.
The Colombian President Iván Duque's response to this grave humanitarian crisis is to try and close the office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, a decision that for social movement is a means to hide the crisis that many communities are facing across the country.
The humanitarian crisis has seen judicial executions, confinement, and the growth of different illegal paramilitary groups.
Projects like the Hidroituango Dam, Anglo Gold Ashanti Mining, and Gran Tierra Energy, among others, have been pointed to by communities as responsible for murders, threats, and disappearances.
Oil workers in Brazil are demonstrating in defense of the state-controlled oil company Petrobras. Union members gathered outside refineries and fertilizer plants in several cities. They are condemning President Jair Bolsonaro's plans to dismantle Petrobras with the sale of 8 of the company's 13 refineries. They also want their collective contract protected. People in the Tambo Valley of Peru are into the 17th day at a regional stoppage. They are protesting against the giant Tía María Copper mining project. They say it will destroy local agriculture, which supplies more than 4 million Peruvians with fruit and vegetables. Jaime Herrera reports.
Yes, indeed. It is now 17 days since the indefinite strike in the Tambo region began, a strike that includes stoppage in different locations. On Tuesday, there was a mobilization in La Joya and other parts of this large agricultural valley, where the level of participation is growing. Next Monday, an indefinite strike is due to start in Arequipa, the regional capital, to demand that the government cancel the Tía María project. The wholesale markets say they will close. The teachers' union say they will stop classes in all state schools to put pressure on the government to withdraw the mining project. Truck drivers also say they will paralyze transport, not only within Arequipa region, but also between Arequipa and neighboring regions and the capital. There are also plans for what they are calling a march of sacrifice to Lima, to take their protest to the heart of the capital and put even more pressure on the government. They say that President Vizcarra is ignoring the demands of the communities and that in his most recent speeches he hasn't even mentioned the issue of Tía María. But the authorities have continued to use violent repression against the protests, leaving a number of people injured, including children. The police have even attacked ambulances that were trying to attend to those hurt.
We thank Jaime Herrera for that report. Outgoing Puerto Rican Governor Ricardo Rosselló has named Pedro Pierluisi as the island's new Secretary of State. He is set to take his oath of office later on Wednesday, and it's expected that a special session of the House of Representatives will be called to debate his appointment. Rosselló was forced to announce his resignation, scheduled for Friday, after over a week of protests demanding his exit over leaked racist, homophobic, and sexist messages. journalist. For his part, Pedro Pierluisi was Puerto Rico's representative in Washington between 2007 and 2019, during which time his family's wealth grew enormously. A 2016 New York Times investigation revealed that at least 2 bills introduced by Pierluisi would have benefited companies that hired his wife. Meanwhile, a Puerto Rican journalist has said new transcripts of social media messages will be published involving outgoing Governor Rosselló and senior members of his administration. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Over 100 human rights activists, journalists, and government workers in Honduras protested against the failures of a mechanism by the government meant to protect them. They say it puts their lives in danger instead of helping them.
A system to protect the lives of human rights defenders, government workers, and journalists was created by the Honduran state, thanks to international pressure and due to the vulnerability of these groups. However, until now, it has failed to carry out its duties, according to a recent survey.
The people who answered the survey are well-known activists and journalists, and they not only gave their testimonies and their experience, but they also provided advice on how to improve the government's approach.
More than 60 journalists have been murdered in Honduras in less than 10 years, while 150 environmental activists died in the same period. Although the state created a protection mechanism for victims, the danger is even worse.
I can go to Choluteca, because if I go there and want to broadcast something, let's say a protest or any other activity, through Facebook Live, the police will come and will throw tear gas bombs at us. They will chase after me on their cars and motorcycles.
Those who are threatened also say that people from the protection mechanism justify their actions by saying they don't have enough funds to deal with security issues, so the situation turns even worse.
Very little of the budget reaches the beneficiaries, who are supposed to be human rights activists or persecuted and victimized people. I think that the mechanism needs to be reviewed in depth.
Most of those who've been affected have received threats after they reported corruption cases within the government, or for opposing the delivery of indigenous land to private projects without any consultation, among other cases.
The reason why they threaten us is because we are protecting the Petacon River, where the hydroelectric power plant is located. I could make the Honduran state responsible for the threats we receive, since the only protection they provide for us is sending police patrols.
Criminalization and persecution of those who protest against the government have increased since Juan Orlando Hernandez took power, in particular after the 2017 elections, when he was accused of electoral fraud.
St. Vincent and the Grenadines Prime Minister Dr. Ralph Gonsalves says those challenging his country's buggery laws should have their day in court. This came as 2 citizens unknown to each other filed proceedings against the buggery and gross indecency laws, which criminalize homosexuality on the island. Dr. Gonsalves says he has no opinion on the matter, but notes he has witnessed a movement by the LGBTQ community as they fight for equality and the freedom to have consensual sex among adults. The court challenges come in the wake of Jason Jones' successful challenge to Trinidad and Tobago's anti-gay laws, a week after a similar challenge was filed in Dominica, and with other challenges already afoot in Jamaica and Barbados. On Monday, the Venezuelan diplomatic mission in St. Vincent and the Grenadines celebrated the 65th birthday of late revolutionary leader Hugo Chavez. The head of the Venezuelan mission, Francisco Pérez Santana, paid a heartfelt tribute to the late leader. He said Chavez was a loyal man, a good friend, a religious man, a teacher, a loving person, a lover of Venezuelan culture, a great communicator, which one of his greatest characteristics. That's Chavez. He also showcased the documentary Chavez, the life of the Venezuelan Hugo Chavez, portraying the human side of a president who started a revolution. The African community in Trinidad and Tobago will be celebrating Emancipation Day on Thursday. In 1985, Trinidad and Tobago became the first country in the world to commemorate the day in 1834, when slavery was abolished. The public holidays marked with street processions, including towering mokojambis in the morning and a flambouk's lead kabulu procession in the evening. Countless events will take place nationwide to celebrate the date. Moving on, protesters in Sudan marched on the streets of Al Obeid, where a number of students were shot dead 2 days ago. The demonstrators gathered at the houses of the murdered students to pay their condolences. The 5 students, who were all teenagers, were protesting against a shortage of bread and an increase to the price of fuel before being killed by allegedly Rouge security forces. Meanwhile, the African Union has strongly condemned killing of the Sudanese students during a press conference in Khartoum. The AU representative, who is mediating talks between protest leaders and the military, also praised the process being made between the two sides.
The African Union strongly denounces the killing of pupils taking part in a peaceful demonstration. What I would like to tell you is that after the end of the meeting yesterday between the protester leader and generals, the gap between the different sides, or at least between the Joint Committee, has gotten extremely smaller.
Protesters have marched in the streets of Monrovia City, Liberia, to demonstrate against alleged corruption and economic mismanagement by the government. The protesters in the second major rally since thousands gathered on June 7th are calling on the government to improve their living conditions. Police fired tear gas to stop the demonstrators from approaching the parliament building. At least 5 people have been arrested. The second patient to be diagnosed with Ebola in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo's Goma City has died. The death comes a day after the case was announced, and health officials say another 15 people have been quarantined in South Kivu, a community that had previously escaped the disease. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has asked the population to be committed in the fight against Ebola.
The role of the population is crucial in the fight against the epidemic. Nothing can be done without a committed population, which is why we train people identified by the community to be able to detect suspected cases of Ebola at the community level, but also to undertake preventive interventions. I think that after more than 1,800 deaths, it's extremely important that people look at reality. Today, if we had been able to make progress in Butembo and Katwa, it is because the population has taken ownership of the answer. People who have lost family members will never say that Ebola does not exist.
Mozambique's President Filipe Nyusi has agreed to sign a peace agreement with the country's main opposition party. The truce will be signed on Thursday, formally ending military hostilities that have existed for almost 3 decades. Both parties fought each other for 16 years in a conflict which left about 1 million people dead. Before a peace accord ended the fighting in 1992. Since then, there has been clashes between the country's security forces and the armed wing of the opposition. The South African state power company Eskom has announced it is anticipating an annual loss of around $1.5 billion. The company expects to make a 20 billion rand net loss in the current financial year after suffering almost the same loss in the previous year. South Africa's primary power supplier Eskom has been forced to implement power cuts this year as its sales declined while debt service costs constrained its operations.
Our earnings, or EBITDA, are sitting at 32 billion, and debt servicing costs and debt payback amounts to 70 billion. So the amount we are generating is not sufficient to even pay the interest.
The number of murder cases in the South African city of Cape Town has continued to rise despite the deployment of the military to crime hotspots 2 weeks ago. According to regional government officials, 46 people were killed across the city this past weekend alone. Fighting between gangs has killed more than 1,500 people since January in the city's mainly black and mixed race townships, where thousands of youths are poor and unemployed. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. At least 50 fuel Ethiopians have died after the boat transporting them to Yemen broke down and left them stranded at sea for a week. Survivors said some died from hunger and thirst and others drowned. The boat was carrying about 90 people. Palestinians have rejected Israel's plan to build 6,000 illegal new homes for Jewish settlers in the occupied West Bank. Israel's decision has been criticized as representative of a colonial mentality and an effort to displace Palestinians. Construction in the occupied West Bank has been seen as an appeal to far-right nationalists by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ahead of elections set for September 17th. The announcement comes a week after Israel demolished around 70 Palestinian homes for, according to them, being too close to a segregation wall in the village of Sur Baher.
This is one way in which this Israeli government is trying to legitimize its illegal war crime of building settlement units in Area C. And they're using a very flimsy excuse or pretext that they will enable the Palestinians to build 600 or 700 units on their own land in Area C in exchange for the Israelis building 6,000 settler units in land which doesn't belong to Israel. This land is Palestinian land.
Spanish railway employees are beginning a strike called by the General Workers' Confederation. The strike is the first of 4 days of planned action, with the coming dates set for August 14th and 30th and finishing on September 1st. The union has announced the operator Renfe's decision to run minimum service as a breach of the balance between the right to strike and the right to movement. Our correspondent in Madrid, Eduardo Marín, has more on the strike.
Once again, the figures about a strike in Spain are being contested. That's the case for the railway workers' strike called by the General Workers' Confederation. According to them, up to 85% of the workers are on strike. However, the train operator Renfe says just 2.9% are engaged in the industrial action. Renfe says that everything is normal, but has offered to replace tickets for other journeys today. According to Renfe, only 109 of 4,901 workers are able to strike today. For short distances, minimum services are running at 75% according to the operator. Mid-distance is at 65% and long-distance and high-speed trains are running at 78%. However, merchant trains are running at just 25% capacity. The union is going to denounce the minimum services for being abusive, and they say that they don't correspond to the reality of the strike's objectives. The union is pushing for better pay, a less overloaded working day, and for fired colleagues to be reinstated.
We thank Edu for that report. Doctors in India have extracted 526 teeth from the mouth of a 7-year-old boy in a rare surgery. Please be warned, the video you're about to see might be considered disturbing. According to the doctors, the surgery took 5 long hours to remove small, medium, and large-sized teeth. The boy had been complaining of swelling on the right side of his lower jaw since the age of 3. The medical issue is known as compound composite odontoma, which are benign tumors composed of dental tissue. In 2014, a similar case occurred where 232 teeth were removed from the mouth of a Mumbai teen. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo.